It began with a signal, not a distress call, not a transmission, something older than language, a reflection of sound bouncing back from a depth where light has not existed since the ocean was young. The sonar operator noted the return. Standard procedure: mark the object, log the coordinates, calculate the size. Then he looked again at the reading. The object beneath the vessel was not small. It was not a whale. It was not a thermal current or an equipment ghost. It was moving, slowly, deliberately, at a depth that no living thing of that apparent mass had any confirmed reason to be. He called his supervisor. His supervisor called the chief scientist. By morning, the data had been forwarded to 3 separate research institutions. No one published anything for 6 months. This is where the story begins. Not with certainty, not with answers, but with a number on a screen, a size, a depth, a velocity that did not fit anything already known.
To understand why that signal mattered, you first have to understand what we do not know about the ocean. The figure is often quoted casually, as though it has lost its ability to disturb. More than 80% of the ocean floor has never been mapped to high resolution. We have more detailed topographic charts of the surface of Mars than we do of the seafloor beneath our own atmosphere. The planet we live on, the only planet confirmed to harbor life, remains, at its deepest and largest extent, a territory of profound ignorance. The ocean covers 71% of the Earth's surface. Its average depth is approximately 3,688 meters. At its deepest confirmed point, the Challenger Deep in the Mariana Trench, the distance from surface to floor exceeds 11,000 meters. If you placed Mount Everest at the bottom of the Challenger Deep, its summit would still sit more than 2 kilometers below the waterline. These are not metaphors designed to impress. They are the structural reality of the environment we are discussing. The ocean is organized, in scientific terms, into zones, not by geography, but by the penetration of light, and therefore by the nature of life that pressure and darkness permit. The epipelagic zone, the sunlit surface layer, extends to roughly 200 meters. This is the ocean most people recognize. This is where coral grows and whales surface and fishing vessels drop their nets. Below that begins what oceanographers call the mesopelagic zone, the twilight zone, where sunlight fades to a faint blue-gray before disappearing entirely. Temperatures drop sharply. Pressure increases. Life here is adapted to scarcity. Bioluminescent fish, translucent creatures built for energy efficiency in a world where almost nothing filters down from above. At 1,000 meters, you enter the bathypelagic zone, the midnight zone. No sunlight, no photosynthesis, complete, absolute darkness. The pressure here is approximately 100 atmospheres, 100 times the pressure at sea level. A human body, unprotected, would not survive long enough to register the experience. The abyssal zone begins at 4,000 meters and extends to 6,000. The hadal zone, found only in oceanic trenches, extends beyond that. These are not simply deep parts of the ocean. They are, in terms of physical conditions, a different world operating under different rules. The signal in question came from within this range, not the upper twilight zone, where large marine life is documented and understood. From the midnight zone and below. This was not the first time unexplained acoustic data had emerged from the deep. In 1997, researchers operating hydrophone arrays in the Pacific, instruments originally designed to monitor submarine activity during the Cold War, recorded an ultra-low frequency sound of extraordinary amplitude. The sound rose in frequency over approximately 1 minute. It was detected across multiple sensors separated by thousands of kilometers. They called it the bloop. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration recorded the event and made the audio publicly available after applying a time compression to bring it into the range of human hearing. For years, the source was undetermined. In 2012, NOAA concluded that the acoustic signature was most consistent with icequake activity, the fracturing and movement of large Antarctic ice sheets. The explanation was rational. It was accepted. But the bloop was a sound. It was not a moving object with measurable dimensions. In the 1960s, during the era of Cold War underwater surveillance, naval sonar operators across multiple nations reported contact with what they termed fast movers, submerged objects displaying speeds and maneuverability inconsistent with any submarine technology then known. Many of these reports were classified. Some have since been declassified as part of broader intelligence archives. They were typically attributed to sensor malfunction, unusual thermal layers, or the misidentification of biological organisms. The dismissals were often correct. Acoustic data in the deep ocean is notoriously difficult to interpret. Sound travels at different speeds through water of different temperatures and salinity. It bends, reflects, diffracts. A single unusual thermal boundary can create acoustic mirages, ghost returns that appear solid and structured on sonar displays, but have no physical object at their origin. The scientific community knows this. Every serious researcher in acoustic oceanography knows this. Which is why, when the data from this particular event was examined, the response was not excitement, it was concern.
The object, if it was an object, presented a return signature that indicated a mass significantly larger than any confirmed biological entity in the marine record. Size estimates derived from sonar return characteristics carry inherent uncertainty. The physics involved are complex, and no single methodology for calculating mass from sonar return is universally accepted. With those caveats clearly stated, the estimates converged across multiple analytical approaches in a range that would exceed the known maximum size of a blue whale by a substantial margin. The blue whale is the largest animal confirmed to exist on Earth, living or extinct in the verified fossil record. A mature adult can reach lengths approaching 30 meters and weigh up to 200 tons. It is a creature of extraordinary scale. Nothing in the known ocean ecosystem approaches it. What was detected did not behave like a blue whale. It did not move like one. It did not occupy the depth range one would inhabit. And by every available estimation, it was larger. Let us consider each of these factors carefully, because they matter.
Blue whales are air-breathing mammals. They must surface. Their dive patterns are documented extensively through tagging studies, and while they can descend to depths exceeding 500 meters on a single breath, they do not occupy the midnight zone. They cannot. The physiological demands of returning to the surface impose a hard ceiling on how deep a diving mammal can functionally operate. The movement pattern recorded in the data was not consistent with the surfacing cycle. There were no returns indicating ascent, no surface detection. The object, whatever it was, appeared to remain at depth throughout the entire observation window, which spanned several hours. Additionally, the temperature at the recorded depth is near freezing, typically between 2 and 4 degrees Celsius. The metabolic requirements of a warm-blooded animal of the estimated size, operating at that depth and at that temperature without access to the surface, would be biologically extraordinary by any currently accepted model. Movement speed was another factor. Cetaceans are powerful swimmers, but their speeds and movement patterns follow recognizable profiles. What was logged moved differently, not dramatically faster, not in ways that violated physics, but in a pattern that did not match the behavioral signatures associated with large marine mammals under any known set of conditions. None of this is definitive. Behavioral anomalies occur in wildlife. Injured animals, disoriented animals, animals in unusual conditions can produce data that deviates from the expected. But the combination of factors, depth, size, movement pattern, absence of surface return, placed this reading outside the envelope of reasonable biological explanation as currently understood.
The rational approach to unexplained data is not to generate the most dramatic explanation. It is to work through the most probable explanations methodically, eliminating each in sequence and accepting whatever remains, no matter how unsatisfying, as the working hypothesis until better data becomes available. The first candidate, geological activity. The deep ocean floor is geologically dynamic. Tectonic plates shift. Hydrothermal vents open and close. Underwater volcanoes are more numerous than surface ones, and many are uncharted. The movement of rock and magma generates acoustic signatures that can, in certain conditions, produce sonar returns resembling moving objects. The ocean floor itself can shift in ways that create what appears to be horizontal motion when analyzed by instruments calibrated for detection in the water column. Analysts examining the data considered this possibility seriously. The movement profile, the specific way the return signature changed position over time, was assessed against known geological acoustic signatures. The conclusion, held cautiously, was that the movement was inconsistent with passive geological processes. It showed too much directional consistency. Geological noise is, characteristically, more chaotic. The second candidate, underwater landslide or sediment displacement. Submarine landslides are not rare events. The edges of continental shelves periodically collapse, sending enormous masses of sediment cascading into deep water. These events can generate tsunamis, acoustic anomalies, and turbidity currents that travel great distances. A large enough sediment plume, under the right acoustic conditions, could theoretically produce a coherent return on sonar equipment. The problem with this explanation, in this specific case, is duration. Submarine landslides are events. They have a beginning and an end. The sonar contact in question persisted over hours, maintaining a consistent signature. Sediment plumes disperse.
They do not maintain structural coherence over that time frame under standard oceanographic conditions.
The third candidate, instrument malfunction or data artifact. This must always be taken seriously. Sonar systems operate in an environment of extraordinary acoustic complexity, and errors, both hardware and software, are not uncommon. A malfunction in a transducer array, a software processing error, interference from an external source, any of these could generate a false return. The equipment involved was inspected both during and after the incident. Calibration logs showed no anomalies. The return was consistent across multiple independent detection passes. Data was reviewed by analysts who were specifically looking for artifact signatures, and while individual data points were flagged and excluded, the core anomaly remained after cleanup. This does not prove the object was real. It suggests that if it was a malfunction, it was a malfunction of an unusual and internally consistent kind, which is itself an unusual malfunction. The fourth candidate, an unknown biological mass. The deep ocean contains ecosystems that science has only begun to document. Every significant deep-sea expedition returns with species previously unknown to science. The midnight zone and the abyssal plain are not empty. They are inhabited by organisms adapted to cold, pressure, and darkness in ways that consistently challenge the outer boundaries of what biologists consider possible. There are precedents for the aggregation of deep-sea organisms producing sonar returns that, at distance, appear to represent a single large object. Schools of fish, clouds of zooplankton, aggregations of squid.
These can present collective acoustic signatures that resemble a unified mass to certain sonar configurations.
The deep scattering layer and diffuse acoustic return documented throughout the world's oceans is produced precisely this way, not by one large creature, but by the combined acoustic presence of billions of small ones. What was not done in the aftermath of this detection was a follow-up survey. This is perhaps the most uncomfortable fact in the entire account. The vessel moved on. The research program it was part of had a defined schedule, defined objectives, defined funding constraints. The anomaly was logged. The data was archived. The institutions that received it classified it not as evidence of anything specific, but as an unresolved data point. A flag in a database that no dedicated research program has yet returned to investigate. This is not a conspiracy. It is not suppression. It is the ordinary reality of how oceanographic science operates in a world of limited ships, limited funding, and an ocean that is simply too large and too deep to monitor systematically. The anomaly is not classified. It is not secret. It is, in the most mundane and frustrating sense, simply unresolved. There is a concept in science called argument from ignorance. The logical error of concluding that something must be true because it has not been proven false, or that something extraordinary must exist because no ordinary explanation has been confirmed. This script is not making that argument. What the data represents at the current state of analysis is a gap, a measurement that does not fit comfortably within the established catalog of known phenomena. It may have a mundane explanation that better instruments or additional observation would reveal immediately. It may be the product of a chain of coincidental instrument conditions that will never be reproduced. The history of science is full of anomalies that dissolved into ordinary explanations the moment someone looked more carefully. It is also, occasionally, full of anomalies that did not. The deep ocean is the largest habitat on Earth by volume. It is the least understood. The species catalog for the mesopelagic zone alone remains substantially incomplete. Researchers estimate that the total biomass inhabiting depths below 200 meters may be significantly larger than current models account for. We are, in the most literal sense, still in the early stages of understanding what lives in the largest part of our own planet. The data from that sonar pass has been reviewed by 12 researchers across 4 institutions since its initial recording. Of those 12, none have offered a conclusion they are willing to publish. Several have stated, in correspondence that was shared for this documentary, that the data presents a genuine interpretive challenge. Several others have suggested that without a controlled follow-up investigation, any interpretation remains speculative. That follow-up investigation has not been funded. The coordinates are in the database. The water is still there. Whatever moved through it, or whatever produced the appearance of movement, has returned to the darkness it came from, or never left it. We build our models of the world from what we can measure, and we trust those models because they have, repeatedly, proven reliable. But models are only as complete as the data that informs them. And in the case of the deep ocean, the data remains profoundly, systematically incomplete. The sonar operator who first noted the return has since moved to a different research program. In an interview recorded for this production, he was asked whether he believed the anomaly had a simple explanation. He thought for a long time before answering. He said, "I've been doing this for 19 years. I know what normal returns look like. I know what ghosts look like. I know what whales look like, and schools of fish, and thermal artifacts, and bad data. This was not any of those things. That doesn't mean I know what it was. It means I don't know what it was. And I've spent 3 years being comfortable with that. There is a discipline in that answer, a precision. It neither claims too much nor dismisses what was observed. It holds the uncertainty without flinching, which is, arguably, the most scientifically honest position available given the evidence. We have always defined the unknown by what it is not. Not a whale, not a geological event, not a malfunction, not anything currently in the catalog. What remains after eliminating the explainable is not a monster, it is not a discovery, it is a question. A specific, geographic, measurable question, sitting unanswered in an archived dataset while the ocean above it continues to move as it always has. Indifferent to our curiosity, indifferent to our categories, indifferent to our need to know. The deep ocean has existed for longer than complex life has existed on this planet. It has been cold and dark and pressurized and vast for an incomprehensible span of time. What has adapted to that environment over that duration may not fit comfortably into any framework we currently possess. We send signals down into the dark and we wait for what returns. Sometimes what returns is familiar. Sometimes it is a number that doesn't match anything in the catalog. And sometimes the most rigorous thing we can do is simply record what we saw and acknowledge that we do not yet understand it. The ocean is not empty. It is simply beyond our certainty.